Hi, I'm Craig Grant. This is Cobweb Maths, and today I'm going to tell you a story about a class I remember. It's about passing the UE exam brilliantly. Alignment occurs when you and your class are on the same page. To do this, you must believe in yourself, for your class to believe in themselves. Henry Ford said, if you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. I'm going to tell you this amazing story and about something few people know about passing exams. Now, the class was a UE maths class, and it was in my third school. There were two UE classes at school. It was a Catholic boys' high school with 450 students, and the UE classes were streamed, and I had the lower class. The university entrance exam was sat by Year 12 students at the end of the year, and to get university entrance, you had to sit four or five subjects, and you had to get a total of 200 marks in 4 subjects, which had to include English. The math exam was 3 hours long. Section A was multi-choice, Section B was short answers, and Section C was long answers. Students had a choice of long answer questions they could do. They didn't have to do them all. The class was like a bent blade that needed to be reshaped and straightened. One of the students, I'll call him John, had fallen off a cliff, been in intensive care, and had some brain damage. His doctors said he wouldn't be able to get UE because of it, but John had other ideas, and so did I. It was great motivation for both of us. It seemed to be mission impossible, but I decided we were going to do it. The first teaching period was critical and successful. I started with small steps and learning sequences using a spiral approach. Each sequence was revisited with the students, and the feedback was used to create the next sequence. That's micro-spiraling. That's the way I teach. For a start, John didn't retain much of what he had learned. At the beginning of each period, I covered the current work again before moving on because I wasn't going to leave John behind. It was heartbreaking sometimes, but John, he was determined, and his retention slowly improved and normalised. I also did macro spiraling. If I have 12 periods to invest in a topic, I did 6 in the first spiral, and on the next spiral I did another 2 or 3. When you have an end of year exam, your students need to know everything then at the end of the year, just before the exam. Linear teaching is not a good way to achieve that. This worked well for John when his retention normalised, because it also gave him repeated opportunities to learn a topic and go back over the topics that he had trouble with at the beginning of the year. By the end of the first term, the class was a straight blade with a rough edge. At mid-year, they sat the school's UE accrediting exams, and most of the class had to sit the public end-of-year exam to get university entrance. Their maths marks were good, but their total was too low for most of them to be accredited UE, university entrance, by the school. The class needed to improve. I told them to leave out their maths mark and add their best 2 subject marks to their English mark. When they had done this, I had them subtract this total from 200. And when they did this, I told them this was going to be their maths mark, and that's how they were going to get UE. Some needed to score close to 80%, but hope filled their faces, and they believed me. That's important. You've got to believe you can do it. Your students have to believe in you, so they can do it. And they have to believe in themselves. They have to have hope. So I gave them hope. And the class immediately began working at a much higher level. During the year, I trained the class to set out their work and follow a step-by-step approach. I linked getting their marks to their setting out and stressed the importance of showing their exam marker what they were doing, because I had created some alternative, simpler ways of solving some problems. Some wouldn't be on the marking schedule and would require the chief examiner to make a ruling. For example, one of the questions was the students were expected to do was find the inverse function of a hyperbola. This was done using the interchange method, which was beyond many of my students. So I came up with a formula for the inverse, so they used that. I also taught my students foolproof methods, which usually involve an extra line of working, to eliminate mistakes, and explained the importance of the extra line of working to them. Then an amazing thing happened. It was like a lightning bolt from the blue sky. Brother Jay, who was head of maths and science and on the scholarship physics examination panel, took me aside and spoke to me. "Craig, do you know we had a problem with the scholarship physics exam?" he said. "The marks were too low." "No," I said. "We changed the order of the exam by putting the long answers first. Nothing else was done and the marks went up." "I see," I said. And that was the end of our conversation. You see, he was a man of few words. I took it on board. The next day, I told the class about what Brother Jay had said to me. Then I informed them that every maths period would begin with 2 long answer questions for them to work out in 13 minutes. The time allocation for one long answer question was 30 minutes, and they had to be better than that because they were going to do the long answers first. Then another strange thing happened. It was really puzzling at the time. It seemed to be a random thing, but it wasn't. It turned out to be very important. "That's bullshit," said a doubting Thomas. "I'm going to do the exam the proper way." "That's fine," I responded. "It's your exam. You can do what you like." My lads relished the challenge of the 2 questions at the beginning of the lesson. None were late to class. And I timed them. So some got so good they could answer 2 long answer questions in 10 minutes. The class blade was now razor sharp. Before the exam, I introduced the idea of an exam plan. Students had to identify their strengths to help pick their best long answer questions to start on first. So I went round the whole class except for my doubting Thomas. I was waiting for my students when they came out of the exam. They made comments like, "We aced it," and were so positive that I wondered if it was an easy exam. "How did the other students find the exam?" I asked. They said it was terrible and they couldn't do it. The results were amazing. And the reason there was a doubting Thomas became apparent. He was my yardstick. In the school exams, he'd been in the middle of the class. In the UE exam, he was bottom of the class. Doing the exam in reverse had worked brilliantly because most of my students got UE, and John was one of them. The other factor at work was long-term memory. Basically, I trained my students and they practiced so many questions they could just do it. And in long-term memory has a spatial dimension, and if you set out your questions, they have a certain form. So they've got if you get your setting out right, you've done 90% of the work. It really is. Get your setting out right and you can get the questions right. And that worked as well. So that's the story. Do the long answers first, and the multi-choice last. and I know how it would work. This is the way it goes. My guys would go into the exam. In the first 15 minutes, they'd have 2 long answer questions and they would just be racing through the work and they would be feeling great. They'd feel right on top of it, no exam stress and everything. They're so well ahead of time. They'd get through the short answer questions pretty easily and then they could just stroll through the multi-choice and they'd have no stress at all. And if you work the exam the other way, what basically happens is that the multi-choices stop-start motoring. You're going to lose time on it and you can get stressed. And of course, once you get stressed, your thinking goes down into the brainstem at the back of your head and you get cut off from the neocortex. So you can't access the information that you want. So doing the exam the other way, my students did really well. That's why my poor doubting Thomas, he basically crashed. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.